And welcome back to Special Report Online. As you know, we do this on Wednesday evenings, right after Special Report. I'm James Rosen, sitting in for Brett Baer, who had to dash out right after the program this evening. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. This is a great forum to continue the conversation with our panel. We want to hear from you, so please weigh in and ask us your questions, and we'll pose them to the panel. Let's bring in the panel one more time. Steve Hilton, A.B. Stoddard, and Byron York. We're dispensing with the titles because, after all, a lot of it's cash, right? And along those lines, I want to turn to you first, Steve, and ask if there is a principle.
What lines do you mean?
Well, you'll find out soon enough.
Something about
yes, a casual. I want to know if there's a principled philosophical basis that informs your aversion to neckties.
No, I thought you were going to ask I thought you were going to ask about the other big burning question that I get all the time, which is my aversion to cell phones.
Tell us about that
later.
What is that pathology?
I don't know. On the necktie issue.
Wait, time out. You don't use a cell phone?
I don't have a cell phone. I haven't had a cell phone.
So you don't have an iPhone. You don't have a cell phone at all.
I don't have a phone.
Wow. What about a tablet?
I have a laptop.
Okay.
Which keeps me in touch on email.
You know who is the other Briton that I happen to know that never uses a cell phone? Because I'm told he said in a small group setting they scare the heck out of him.
Right.
Prince Charles. Now, that's good work if you can get it.
I'm not sure if that's the kind of company I want to be in. Anyway, the tie issue, to be fair, this is not some, I live in California now, and a lot of people assume it's some kind of West Coast affectation. Even when I worked in 10 Downing Street for the Prime Minister, I had an aversion, as you put it, to the necktie. So I don't
and what is
they indulged?
They indulged. It was.
You still have 5 minutes left on this therapy session. So, what is the origin of that aversion?
I genuinely don't know.
Are you willing to experiment with a necktie?
Okay, well, the viewers may remember, some of them who were with us on Inauguration Day, that in honour of that special occasion, I sat in that chair where Byron is right now and wore a tie.
So is your closet like 50 black T-shirts?
Pretty much,
no,
that's
sometimes
right.
there's an aqua. He has some good colors.
For my show on Sunday night, I try and, brighten it up a bit.
Steve's closet is the bizarro antithesis of Tom Wolfe's closet, which was all white suits, right? So if we brought them together, it'd be a good
No
match.
spats either, by the way.
And Roger Stone's closet, where his jeans are arranged by geniness.
Well, I think discussion of Oliver Stone's closet in light of recent events and comments
is
Roger.
Roger Stone's closet. Okay. Either way, those are closets.
Completely different.
Yeah, those are closets I wish not to visit. So Leslie H., Leslie spelled L-E-S-L-I-E-H, tells us, so tired of the Washington squabbling. Trump was elected because no one can trust the Republicans or the Democrats. They are in it for the power, not for the people. Just to continue our discussion of this controversy that erupted today over the president's call to the widow of a fallen service member. I want to know from the panel, and jump ball here, folks, do you think it was appropriate for this member of Congress, whatever her feelings about the call, whatever the truth of what was said in the call, to leap out onto television and start disclosing the contents of the call for the purpose of criticizing the commander-in-chief?
No, I don't think so. And I think she was, she's, this is Representative Wilson. She's somebody who's been obviously very strongly opposed to the president from the get-go. And it gave it a political tint from the very beginning. I think that you have to separate this into two things. You have to talk about what the president did at his news conference, in which he brought up Barack Obama and previous presidents and suggested that he, Donald Trump, has called everybody and they didn't.
So was he the first to politicize the issue?
Well, that was remarkably stupid for him to do.
I heard you say that. I'm just asking, was he the first to politicize the issue?
He did politicize this issue.
So in other words, what this congresswoman then did, Representative Wilson, was just kind of in kind.
Well, she made a factual representation, as the president did, who got a lot of fact-checking afterwards. She made a factual representation about the phone call. I believe she did say she was paraphrasing, so I don't know exactly what the president said in terms of Sergeant Johnson knew what he was getting into.
What he signed up for.
We don't what he signed up for. We don't know the words that he used.
The president denies having said this, A.B. But when I heard the comment, I thought to myself, having met a number of incredible service members who risked their lives quite knowingly, that is the essence of courage, was that really, if he would have said such a thing, is that offensive? Because they do know what they sign up for.
I'm going to start by saying I tried to say on the show in my answer that I don't think what he said was wrong. And I think that Congresswoman Wilson was wrong to politicize it by saying the following things: that he has a brain disorder, the president, and this is going, that the Niger ambush is going to be his Benghazi. So she politicized it. That said, apparently the widow said that she doesn't believe the president knew her husband's name. Her relatives, his relatives, are upset by what they heard on the call. They were in the car. And as Byron points out, the president started this on Monday. He needs to stay away from the subject of Gold Star families, on which he has an awful record. And this is the one group of people that need to be spared.
You know, there was that episode during the summer, during the political conventions, when the president got into it with the Khan family, which was a Gold Star family. And at the time, that raised the question about whether or not Gold Star families should be immune from any criticism if they sally forth into the political fray and criticize a candidate or what have you. And as it happened, everyone thought that that contretemps with the Khan family was going to be the moment where President Trump would run out his luck in these sort of confrontations. People thought that would happen with John McCain, perhaps with Megyn Kelly, with the Pope and others, and now the Khan family. And in fact, he survived all of that. Steve, you talked during the program on television about the debasing of the political discourse that this seems to reflect. Have you seen things like this in your own native country, in having worked in politics there, or is this unique to the United States?
No, it happens from time to time, and it's pretty bad when it happens, because you just, and I think AB's right, you just got to call a stop to it at some point. You can't keep going this sort of back and forth. You've seen it particularly in the UK. I'm just sort of trying to recall, but it's arguments about the National Health Service, about healthcare policy. For a long time, when I was just getting started in politics, so many of them ended up being about victims, people who've been treated badly, people who've died at the, it was just wheeling out in a frankly rather ghoulish way individual cases to make political points, always tragic cases. It just felt so exploitative. And then it just sort of moves on. There was one election campaign where it really took over the whole general election campaign for about 4 or 5 days, and then everyone just knew that this was too much. And
toxic.
That's right, and it just ended.
One more thing on the Khizr Khan thing. You said that the president got into it with the Khizr Khan family.
That's
I think it's more accurate
technical
to say,
political science
I think they're very good. I think it's more accurate to say Khizr Khan got into it with the president. He was recruited by the Democratic Party to deliver this attack, very emotional attack on Donald Trump, candidate Trump, from the podium of the Democratic National Committee and convention. And Trump fought back. And clearly the smart thing for Trump to have done would simply to say that I honor your son's service, and I'm sorry you're unhappy with me, and I'll be the best president for all Americans. He didn't do that because that's not what Donald Trump does. But I think we should admit or say that both in the case of Representative Wilson and in the case of the Khizr Khan controversy, this is something people are attacking the president, who then reacts badly.
It does seem as though there is no verbal engagement or Twitter engagement that this president sees fit to pass up when he is attacked. And that perhaps it might behoove him in some instances to do so, surely for his own political interests at some points. Just to close this out, we want to show you the tweets, the exchange of tweets between the president and Congresswoman Wilson earlier today. The president tweeted, "Democrat Congresswoman totally fabricated what I said to the wife of a soldier who died in action, and I have proof. Sad." And then Congresswoman Wilson countered on Twitter, "I still stand by my account of the call between President Trump and Maisha Johnson. That is her name, Mr. Trump, not the woman or the wife." One last question on this. AB, you have covered a number of State of the Union addresses. Is what's happening here and what Steve described, where tragic cases are invoked and kind of used as a political football, any more exploitative than what we see at a typical State of the Union address, where heroes are then brought out and by presidents in both parties kind of used as human props for their political agendas?
Right, and President Trump had one at his congressional address on February 28th. He had the wife of the fallen. There was a huge part of his speech. She thanked him. She wept through it. It's been done by presidents before him. I see what's different as what he started on Monday and then what he said today, which many will have to conclude is not true.
Which is what?
That he has proof. That turned out, according to his press secretary, not to be. He didn't really. I guess he has proof because someone was in the room. He always makes it a big schoolyard brawl, and this is just, as I keep repeating, that it doesn't
Does he
matter.
make it
as
the
Byron
brawl?
says, if someone throws something at him, he's baitable, and this is the wrong crowd from which to take the bait. And what he did on Monday was speak in a barrage of stories on social media about how wonderful President Obama and President George W. Bush were to the families of the fallen. So it makes him look terrible. It also makes it just actually dragged out whether or not there is some scandal behind this ambush in Niger. I just think he brings all sorts of problems on himself, and he enjoys it.
So can I just say one thing about
Please, Steve.
the politics and this question of why it doesn't hurt him? I think one of the reasons for that, and I don't think this is an act of conscious political strategy on his part. I don't think he thinks like that. But certainly in my experience of being involved in election campaigns in the UK and elsewhere in the world, one of the most important things that in the end is the character of a candidate. And a consistent character is what people are really judging when they decide who to vote for. And whether you like it or not, what this way of behaving conveys to people this fact that he literally will never let any attack go unanswered, whoever it's from.
And what does that in turn say about the character?
Well, what is strength, actually? It says to some people, those who are disposed to like and support the president, there you are, that's my guy. He's strong. And if he's like that to all of these people, he's sure hell going to be like that to Putin or whoever these other people are around the country.
Anyone.
It conveys, well, I know that, but it conveys a sense of strength, and even though the individual cases people might not like, overall, they like that way of a leader behaving, because it's
they, meaning, as you just put
supporters.
it, the supporters.
Yeah.
Is this a mode of behavior that will grow his base of support? Right now, the Real Clear Politics average of major reliable polls places the president's job approval rating at 38% or thereabouts. Is this the kind of behavior that will bring him above the 50% mark?
No, but it certainly won't bring him lower.
Nothing
Byron.
brings him lower, but he's not
Look,
trying to grow
the
his
reason
followers,
this
that's right.
advice doesn't work with him, and I've talked to voters, to office holders, they all want him to cut back on the tweets. They want him to stop behaving like this in some way. So he has a circle of advisors telling him, Mr. President, you need to dial it back a little bit. And he looks at him and says, now, how many of you have been elected President of the United States? Because it worked for him.
Are you telling us there
doing it.
that is actually the kind of the actual back and forth that you've heard expressed?
That's his
I've heard it too.
point of view.
How many of you got elected President of the United States?
There's one
basically?
person in this room who's been elected President of the United States, and I think I know how to do it. I think that's his attitude toward this.
AB, outside of the president's what we might call hardcore base of support, are there Americans who do regard his conduct as kind of redolent of give him hell, Harry Truman?
I think that President Trump is his own singular experience. And I think that there are people who love him for whatever reasons, as Steve highlights, that will stay with him. But some of them have tired. I mean, if you look at sort of who he's lost from the 46% he had at victory, some of them have tired of the fact that he does. If you listen to focus groups of people who supported Trump, they'll often say he really does always bring it back to himself. They are waiting for him to make it about them. Now, there are the rest of them that just love him and think that everything he does is great, including all the bomb throwing. But there are people who are beginning to question his business acumen being something that transfers to governing, his election acumen being something that transfers to governing, how much he really is fueled by grievance instead of Americans' problems. And how much harder he makes governance with the way that he turns on the team, the way he always scapegoats and blames, and you can see that anecdotally.
I think that's I think that's right. The drop off there, I think, is those people who are particularly ready to believe this notion of a businessman coming to Washington to sort things out, get things done, do deals, just
and
not
hire the best people.
And the disappointment in the sense that he hasn't done the deals that we want to. He hasn't seemed to be able to work with
Byron,
companies.
I'll give you 15 seconds because I'm told the viewers want to move on from this.
There's something else
which maybe
about this.
proves A.B.'s point.
Something else about this, which is the people who are not actually paying attention to this, because I was talking to people at the Heritage Foundation where Trump spoke last night, and we were talking about whatever the daily hair on fire controversy is, which is what we're talking about right now. There was one a few days ago. There'll be another one tomorrow. It just goes on and on and on with Trump. And they said, we just don't pay attention to that, and you get the feeling that everybody's screaming, their hair's on fire, and then after a while you look back and the building is half built. What they're saying is he's actually getting the things that they want done, getting out of trade agreements, deregulating, doing a lot of things that they
That's right, and I think you've got other bits.
So they don't care about the daily conflagration in the media.
Broader than just the domestic agenda. Look at what's going on with ISIS, and so there are definite things that are going well.
Steve, do you take it personally when Byron, who's always sported a sprouting, boyish head of hair, talks about the voters with their hair on fire?
No, I'm very open to any kind of self-deprecating reference in regard to that. I make them myself. My favourite is when I come to the studios here, and I don't know if the viewers know, but we all go into what is known as hair and makeup.
Yes.
Before we come and put ourselves
Again,
on the cameras.
these are discriminatory things.
That's right. So I always insist on it being called hair and makeup, even for me.
Okay, so some of our viewers want to talk about the Uranium One deal and a story that appeared in the Hill newspaper this week by John Solomon and another reporter. I looked closely at this story, and what I determined about it was that there wasn't really much new news in the story, but what it did was it took two events that kind of overlapped chronologically and hadn't previously been juxtaposed and connected them as dots and drew some inferences therefrom. The two stories were the sale of roughly 20% of the American supply of uranium to a Russian group in 2010 when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, a subject that was discussed in great abundance up through and including the fall campaign last year. The other story was an investigation that the FBI and the Department of Justice were conducting in Maryland involving a number of Russian nationals who were involved in the uranium industry. They started this investigation in 2009. The charges against a number of individuals were unsealed in 2014, and in 2015, a press release was issued by the Department of Justice touting the fact that a guilty plea had been secured from one of these Russian nationals in Maryland. The charges seem to indicate that there was some corruption in the whole business surrounding uranium and its transport, and that therefore the inference drawn from the article was, why didn't the FBI and the Department of Justice raise these issues about alleged corruption in the transport of uranium prior to the decision by the Obama administration in 2010, when the Justice Department was already working on this case for a year, to try and influence that decision? Any thoughts anyone has on this subject?
I found it really quite amazing and disturbing that if you have this investigation, and there's a quote from someone in the piece who was in the FBI at the time, a deputy director of some department who didn't even know about this investigation. And what's so alarming is that the Committee on Foreign Investment can be making these decisions about doing energy deals or any kind of deal with a foreign power with our material or anything, even if we're just
and not just any foreign power.
And that we could have this kind of wall off in government where intelligence about this racketeering situation, which ended up being a crime, a proven crime, isn't a part of that decision. I mean, it's
let me play devil's advocate with you.
Belief.
First of all, some would argue that the Uranium One deal was so prima facie bad, which is fancy Latin for on its face bad, that the Committee on Foreign Investment hardly needed to understand the details of this ongoing criminal investigation in order to reject that deal. Moreover, when you have the FBI and the Department of Justice pursuing a complex case that has foreign entanglements and so forth, At what point, a year into it, should they be willing to roll it up and forego any chance of developing more string in that case so that the Committee on Foreign Investments can make its own decisions? I think that question is raised by the article. Byron?
Well, I agree with AB here. The thing that really struck me about the article was the fact that all of this corruption involving Russia and uranium was not taken into account in this decision, which had national security implications. Uranium is not just any commodity, and it was giving over a very large portion of the United States uranium supply. On the not knowing, the left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing, it reminded me of testimony that we had in the Russia interference investigation when James Clapper was testifying, I think in front of the House, and he revealed that he didn't know that the FBI had started a counterintelligence investigation into the possibility of Russians trying to influence the election.
I mean, when the FBI and the DOJ have a case like this going, is it their responsibility to spread knowledge of their ongoing investigation and its details to every sector of the intelligence community or the Committee on Foreign Investment?
But wait, isn't there an important bit of this missing, which is the Clinton Foundation?
That was an element to the article. Yes, so let me explain that briefly to our viewers. This same article in The Hill, in its third paragraph, and the story was 38 paragraphs long, said that the FBI had developed an eyewitness account backed by documents indicating that there were large transfers of cash to the Clinton Foundation.
It actually was to an entity that did work with the Clinton Foundation.
Yeah. In fact, when one got to paragraph 35, which was the next reference to this eyewitness account,
you are right.
Okay, that is when the story disclosed that, in fact, the cash transfers were to an American entity that did business with the Clinton Foundation. But who the eyewitness was, what they had to say in terms of any quotes, where these cash transfers came from and to whom, or the name of the American entity, all that was missing from this article.
And isn't there also, again, maybe you can help clear it up, but there's some angle here with speaking fees for Bill Clinton connected?
Yes, that was thoroughly explored at the time the Uranium One story first developed.
It was the Clinton Cash book, I believe, that reported all of this stuff, and that was kind of litigated to a large degree in the campaign, where basically Hillary Clinton said, it wasn't my decision alone, there were all these other people in this committee, and everybody
including the Attorney General at the time, by the way, who presumably would have some idea of this kind of investigation ongoing involving Russian nationals and alleged corruption of the uranium transport business. Steve, can you give us any sense of the view from abroad of the Russia investigation, the Mueller probe, how foreign leaders or foreign audiences interpret this?
Not really, I'm afraid, because I'm here.
But you have a foreign accent. You must be able to do this.
I genuinely don't. I suspect that it's part of the general sense of, who the hell is Donald Trump? What's going on? It's all chaos. Whatever. That I think is the overwhelming international response, and I think it's completely it's not justified, because actually it's another example of the political class just not accepting anything that is different to the way things have been done. So they don't like the way that he speaks, the way he behaves in meetings, the way diplomacy has done, all of that. I think this is just seen as part of this whole mess, as they would see it.
Henry Kissinger served as Secretary of State and National Security Advisor in the latter year of Watergate, and he reported that in his discussions with foreign leaders, they would all say to him, including the Soviets at the time, why is the United States of America, a great nation, tearing itself apart over such a small thing as a little break-in? Obviously, Watergate was more than one break-in, but I wonder if there is some of that sentiment now, and perhaps the audience that is most relishing it all are the Russians. We'll have to leave it there, food for thought.
Well, hang on, the Russian interference aspect of it does affect other countries, because they're on the receiving end of it too. So that part, I think, is of genuine interest.
A point well taken. And Terry in Maryland, Terry MD, writes, James has to do some singing or imitations before we draw the curtain here.
Absolutely.
That's actually factually untrue. And so we want to wave goodbye to our control room, who did a great job. Okay, all right, a little Howard Cosell maybe for the demo-friendly. That's going to do it for Special Report Online. We give our thanks to Steve Hilton, A.B. Stoddard, Byron York, and remember, you can catch Special Report again tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern, on your Fox News Channel stations. Good night. There you go.